Welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name, of course, is Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about Final Fantasy XIV in 2020. How's it going, everyone? Hopefully you are having a great day. Today's video is actually a little bit longer than usual. As a lot of you pointed out in the past videos comments, which is always very appreciated, the trial is super short. And with that in mind, I thought I would pair up the trial, being the Cape Westwind, I believe, and the next dungeon after that, which is the Castrum Meridianum. I think it's become harder and harder for me just to recall the names of things. I should really just write them down before the video, but I feel like those are correct and I haven't messed them up. But if I did switch them up, I'm sorry. But yeah, so we've put them together in this video, which I think will be great because ultimately I think a really good point of discussion in this video is what is the difference between trials and dungeons, and how Final Fantasy XIV kind of treats dungeons and raid content very differently than a lot of other MMOs. Because before we get into it, I know there's other types of trials that I haven't fully explored. Like I know it goes up to at least 24 players, I believe. So I feel like those for sure will start to feel very raid-like. But if we're just comparing this trial and this dungeon, I would say that the trial felt more like kind of a dungeon, and the dungeon definitely felt more like a trial. Because if I look at these types of content in other MMOs, a dungeon is typically a shorter piece of content with fewer players. A trial is typically, a raid is typically a longer piece of content with more players. So both of them in this situation have 8 players, which, for the trials has felt quite similar to like a 10-man raid. For me, it's very rare to ever do a dungeon with more than 5 players. So it felt kind of particular doing a dungeon with 8 players, and I'd say the dungeon in this video definitely felt more like a raid than anything. The trial, however, felt extremely short. It was still just one boss, which the other ones have been, but it was just such a quick fight that people just got in, killed it, and we were out within like a few minutes, which once again everyone in the comments predicted. I was kind of like, nah, it's not gonna be that short, but no, it was that short. And you can see it in the background, like it's super quick. The only thing that's made it longer is like the 4 minutes of cutscene on either side, which is great. I always enjoy some story content alongside it, and still to this point, even with the shorter actual trial, people have been very, decent about letting people watch the cutscenes and go through this. And this has been the same with both this trial and the dungeon, because there is a fair bit of cutscene throughout the actual gameplay, which I find somewhat jarring at times, and we'll get more into that in the second part of this video. But one of the biggest issues I think I had with this trial was that for a lot of the cutscenes, it seemed like we were the only person fighting against the boss. Like, it would always be the boss speaking directly just to us, and then we'd come out and all of a sudden we'd have our team of 8 other players that we couldn't kill the boss without, and then we'd go back into a cutscene like we vanquished the boss ourselves. It was kind of jarring because it's like this was a team activity that we kind of organized a lot of people for, and we don't really see it. We do see our, NPC sort of squad of people in the closing cutscene that were kind of watching us from a distance, which is also kind of weird. But yeah, it's just weird with there being a large group of 8 players that you don't see more of them in the cutscenes. And I don't know if at this point it's a technology thing, because I know this is obviously content created a long time ago, or if this is a stylistic choice and will be the same later on in different pieces of content as well. So I'm very interested to see how that progresses. I do know that Final Fantasy XIV has a fair bit of a focus on the main character that you play being the main hero. And once again, that story itself will probably shift as time goes on. But I'm interested to see. So yeah, I enjoyed the trial. I thought it was really good. It wasn't, there wasn't anything special to the gameplay really that I noticed because of how quick it went. It was a very traditional thing where the boss thinks he's all tough, sends away his guards, almost dies, guards come rushing back, we kill everyone, just another day at work in Final Fantasy XIV. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. So let's get on to the dungeon now. So now we're going to be talking about the Castrum Meridianum. This is the dungeon that you'll do at level 50. It is also, I think, the first 8-player dungeon I've ever done, which is pretty cool, spanning across pretty much any MMO, I think. I don't think I've done an 8-person dungeon before. Like I mentioned, they're typically raids, so it's pretty cool as well. It seems to you probably that just an instant has gone by since I spoke about the trial, but I'm actually recording this video after work, whereas the other one was recorded before work. So if my voice has changed, if I sound different, that's why. But there you go, a little glimpse into the recording process. But yeah, so we're gonna take a look at this dungeon. It's a pretty self-explanatory sort of plot here. We're trying to invade this base. There are 3 shield generators that need to come down, and our goal is to take down those 3 generators, which is pretty cool. It's a really aesthetically interesting place as well, because we do have a lot of sort of crystal, but a lot of machinery as well, which is nice. I am healing once again, so I felt a little bit of pressure because it is the 8 people for a bit more of content, like a bit longer piece of content, which I know that, certain dungeons have been an issue in the past, so it definitely took a little bit more focus, which is all right. And really what it amounted to is we kind of would run through a large area, mob up everything, and then kill, and it would be sort of like a huge spike of healing that would need to be done, and then a lot of like just downtime. And I suspect that this is because it is a lower level dungeon, and a lot of people have done this a billion times and probably know exactly what to do. So it was kind of interesting. What was nice, I guess, as a new player is that I could very much just play follow the leader, and there wasn't much issue there. So it definitely didn't make it too difficult. It was more just being super ready for the healing or the damage to spike as soon as the tank would stop, which was difficult. The bosses themselves, though, melt down pretty quick, and I don't think I really noticed any like mechanics that I had to pay attention to too much. I think once again it has to do with how quick we were able to take it down. A few people in the party mentioned that we had pretty good DPS as well, so I'm going to trust them on it and believe that we did pretty well. But yeah, so it was very interesting. We do face kind of the same issue I had with the trial, though, where we'll do all this stuff as 8 players, and then the cutscenes, I'll just be by myself talking to Sid. And it's very jarring. It's kind of weird, because we'll just keep running into Sid, and like my entire squad will just go away. It's I don't know what to think about it. I really am not a huge fan, and I kind of hope that they address this further on in the game. For instance, one of my favorite ways that this is handled is in Guild Wars 2. In their raids, what will happen is you'll enter into, sort of a raid, and some NPCs will talk, but then to share your side of the story, each player will kind of say a line of dialogue, and everyone will hear it, and there'll be even like a chat bubble kind of above their head or whatever, and it's random each time as to which players get what piece of dialogue, but it's like you're actually, as a group sort of experiencing the story. Whereas this, I feel very phased out from everyone else. Like, as an MMO player, you want to feel like you're a part of a group of other players. And the actual gameplay portion does this really well. But I think the cinematic portion of at least this dungeon and the most recent trial have not done a super good job that way. So I'm interested to see what it looks like in the future. So another issue that I faced a fair bit through this dungeon is that, you know, randomly from combat, you'll go into a cutscene for like a second, and then you'll go back into combat, and it's particularly terrifying as a healer because you'll see your tank starting to take a bunch of damage, and you're rushing to heal them or something like that, and then all of a sudden the screen goes black, and you're like, what happened? Oh, it's a cutscene. Now, the game seems to have done a really good job of making sure that no damage is taken during the cutscenes, and that I've always been able to recover from it, but it always did feel not so great, which I didn't like at all. It was, you know, you'd be rushing around, then all of a sudden the screen would go black, and you'd be like, oh my god, and then cutscene, and then back in the action, oh my god. Like, it's a very abrupt change, which is difficult to deal with. Now, I don't know if I did a particularly good job at healing or not. I'm sure the other healer in the party was definitely carrying a little bit as well, but I felt like I did a pretty good job of not standing in too much of the chaos, which would become pretty bad when we did stack up eventually, because we had so many different telegraphs in different ways, and something I've become used to now, but the way the Final Fantasy XIV telegraphs work, you know, you can look like you've dodged out, but if you were there when it went over you, you'll get hit anyways. So if you have that happen a couple times in a row, you can really take a fair bit of damage without initially realizing, you know, hey, I'm gonna get hit for a fair bit. So it's definitely a pretty big learning curve, I'd say, with the actual telegraphs, just kind of knowing when you're gonna get damaged from it, and just preparing for that delay. Because if you are, you know, prepared for it, you can, especially as a healer, do a fair bit to get ready for it. But yeah, so it's been pretty good. You can see here that we're, you know, eyeing the towers and kind of getting deeper in. Here we very much just disable the tower and it turns off. There's a mix of that as well as some blowing up of stuff later in the video. What's interesting, I'd also say, is that the bosses themselves have all been fairly similar. They're kind of these big robot structures that we have to beat, which is cool because I do respect that there's a theme to the dungeon. Like, everything in here feels very thematic and fits very well. It's just, as a player, it kind of gets a little bit repetitive, and I think the bigger issue to this is that we're just killing them so quickly that we're not able to see if there's any like specific mechanics that you have to prepare for or do differently. And I'm probably saying this and just like you're watching me like do the mechanics terribly just because I don't understand or something like that, which is completely valid. I'm probably like just healing through like stuff that I should be avoiding and stuff like that. But it never felt like something that I had to worry about. I don't think mana was ever an issue. I have become better at using my mana regenerating skills in a more timely fashion, which is also good. But you know. So we see Sid come in on his bird thing. These things look very much like a much tankier, much heavy-dutier version of the WoW mounts that the gnomes get. Kind of like, I call them chicken walkers, and I know that's like not at all. I think they're called like mecha riders or something. God, I don't actually know. And this is from someone who played a lot of gnome gameplay, and I don't know what they're called. But these definitely remind me of those. The way they walk, it's like a weaponized version of those, which is pretty terrifying, really, because, you know, I wouldn't want to be blown up by it. But you know. So Sid's walking around on this thing, which is pretty cool. And once again, though, we're kind of charging into battle, and it's just the two of us. But I know once we come out of the cutscene, you know, we're going to see everyone else around him. So I think it must have just been like a technology thing that prevented them from being able to have everyone in the cutscenes, because I think that would add so much more to the gameplay. And I'm sure I'm mostly just like complaining about this the whole time, and you guys are like, okay, we get it, you know, carry on. But it does. It's probably the #1 complaint I've had with the 2 pieces of content so far at 50. I like the letters here. So these are obviously what people would use, I'm assuming, to like stand in different places for raids. I haven't actually seen those ever go out yet. Is it probably like, can anyone in the group do them, or would it be more of a leader of sorts that puts them down? I'd be interested if I can play around with them. And it's dangerous that they give you some letters to spell stuff out, because people, you know MMO players, they're gonna spell some not so nice words for people to read. This reminds me, the map in Guild Wars 2 you can draw on, which is such a handy feature. It's actually one of the best quality of life features that no one talks about. You can draw sort of like arrows as to where you want to go. You can draw, little circles around things, and you can draw, body parts and stuff like that, and faces, and it can be a bit of a unfortunate scene sometimes, specifically in PvP games where you're not happy with your team. All this to say, players will do the worst kind of things. So you'll see here that I do some pretty good clutch heals. I might have let them get pretty low, but I did end up saving them. I'm sure it's actually just the other healer that's just like freaking out and like healing everything, but I felt like I did some pretty good heals there. I think as a healer, it's kind of one of those roles where you're not super appreciated, but if something goes wrong, it's very clearly your fault, which is, I think, one of the reasons people kind of avoid, healing and tanking, is that if you do your job properly, it's like you weren't even there. But as soon as you mess up, it's going to be obvious that you messed up, and it's going to suck. It's really, really going to suck. So, I'm embracing the healing, and I don't actually heal very often in MMOs. I think I've brought that up a few times too. I'm typically a damage dealer. I've occasionally been a tank, but a lot of my other friends really enjoy healing. And because of that, I don't often do it. Not because I dislike it, but it's just something that doesn't come up. I think one of the hardest things as a healer, especially for doing content for the first time, is that you have to always be watching. If you don't know like when there's going to be bursts of damage, you have to be ready for like these huge bursts to come out of nowhere. When it's the 100th time you've done a dungeon and you know exactly when the damage is going to spike, sure, you can kind of like just stroll along and be ready for those big moments. But as a first run, yeah, you got to be watching. What I like about Sid as well is that he has this awesome robot, and he is just sort of watching in the background as we clear things out for him. And as it turns out, this robot has a huge gun that can destroy even towers, but using that for the monsters is crazy. It's reserved for these towers, and it only had one shot. So I guess it was kind of fair that he saved it for the tower, but he also looked surprised that it only had one shot too. So I don't know. I think he could have been helping us a little bit more than he is. It's always kind of the case in this story, and it's not just Final Fantasy XIV. It's a lot of other MMOs, that there's these NPCs that are very highly looked upon, and we kind of do all of the stuff for them. Like we're going everywhere, we're doing everything, and they just sort of are along for the ride. And then they always are there for the cinematics when things go well, and they are sometimes there for the cinematics when things don't go well. But it's rare that they're in the fights. And I know as a gameplay kind of situation, it's sometimes difficult to work in NPCs and make them feel valuable and like an actual asset to the fight without it taking away from like the player's impact in the fight. I think one of the best examples of this done well is the actual Lich King fight in World of Warcraft, where the Lich King wipes everyone at 10%, and then an NPC does their little piece and reses everyone. So it feels like they have had a huge impact on the fight, but a lot of the 90% of the fight is done by the players themselves. So I think that's kind of a really nice balance that a lot of people try to, games should try to strike that balance where it feels like the NPCs are valuable, but not so much that they take away from everyone else's role in the game. I've kind of just been like jumping to different parts in this dungeon where I have something to say, because there'll be long stretches of time where we're just sort of running and collecting everything, and there's not a ton going on, which is interesting. It was kind of difficult because like I wanted to explore a little bit more, and you definitely have the sense that everyone in the party is kind of like, let's get this done. This is kind of an urgency thing. It's still very nice that you're able to watch all the cutscenes, and it kind of forces you to do that. Whereas a lot of games, other players could move past the cutscenes and like be well into the dungeon, and you're just coming in as a new player and you're like, oh, okay. And it really messes them up. So Final Fantasy XIV does an excellent job of forcing people to kind of wait that step for the new players. It also does mention, and I've mentioned this before, that there are players that haven't done the dungeon before. It'll say that to everyone when they first come into the dungeon. And I think that really sets the tone for people that, you know, some people are probably going to be really about the story, or they're not going to understand some mechanics and something like that. So it is really nice that way. It's definitely one of the more comforting things when I do go into a new piece of content in Final Fantasy XIV, that I do know that people are going to get that message and they're going to be like, oh, they're, you know, not going to know exactly what to do. I love how fortunate this incident is. Like, the ship blows up, great, and takes out the generator. What are the chances? I feel like moments like these are like, okay, that really happened in real life. And they kind of, you know, mention, like, they nod at this as well in the game, but it's you know. So what I want more than anything would be Cid's robot against this robot, and just like a full-on robot fight, chicken fight to the death. You know, where even if they won, you know, fine, we lost, they can win. I just want to see the chicken fight. I think it would be excellent. And I might be crazy for calling them like chicken. It's kind of like the big legs and sort of the style they move. But once again, this is another cutscene where it looks like we're gonna face off against the final boss by ourselves. Oh wait, there's like, number one, a huge group of us. Number two, we're not anywhere near where it just showed us. Like, there's such a disconnect between what's going on in the cutscene and what's going on in the gameplay. I think, and I know I kind of hate this sometimes in other MMOs, but what they'll do is they'll have to wait until everyone gets to the same place and then the cutscene will play. And I think that's the solution to this situation that's having random cutscenes play. Because it's probably someone who's rushing ahead who trips the cutscene, and we're just so far away that, you know, we're not involved. What's nice is that you get brought into the sealed area anyways, because we've been in other MMOs where a healer gets trapped out of the boss room, and it's quite the issue for quite some time, right? So it's nice that they do that. This was a interesting fight. I'd say this is the only one that I really felt like there was mechanics happening. I didn't feel like we were in danger ever, but it clearly seemed like we were trying to protect these cannons from the adds that would rush in. And I assume at one point this was probably quite the challenge, to burst down adds before they did too much damage to your cannons, right? Like, that would be quite the thing, but I think with our higher DPS, it just never really felt like it was an issue. And I even kind of just switched to general chat for a second to see if there's any mechanics that I should be doing, and, you know, it was just like, no, just business as usual. I've had a few people actually mention, and I should talk about this, I guess, in the videos, that, hey, you're in, you know, battle chat or whatever, you should be in general chat seeing what people are saying. I do check from time to time, but I try to keep as much of the general chat out of videos as possible, because sometimes there is stuff that should not necessarily go into a video that people don't know is going to be shared. So it's just better YouTube practice in my mind to kind of keep out as much chat as possible. Sometimes it's going to slip in, and 99% of the conversations I have with people on online in MMOs, it's all about nothing, so it doesn't really matter. But my general practice is to try and keep as much of that out as possible. So if you do see the combat chat, you should know that whenever I am super confused, I'll tend to go and check what's being said, or I'll whisper someone or something like that, and sometimes I'll cut that out of the video, but it has happened. So something to know. But yeah, we have our final conversation with this boss lady, who looks or thinks that she's going to kill us. I mean, it's such a typical boss thing to think, oh, this is going to be no challenge. I'm going to kill you so easily. Prepare to die. What I do love are her weapons. Like, it's just she's got a cool outfit. I wish I could be dressed like that. Like, it's so nice. It's the white, I think, that really does it, that sells it. Like, it's kind of like a jester of death, which is just great. It would be a very good, like, assassin-y thief looking class, I think. You could kind of like do a lot of flips and stuff like that and be very mobile. I think that would be the most enjoyable, but certainly the weapons. Because it looks like we've got sort of blades with like a gun at the bottom, like really nice. I do enjoy it. And then it's just got a very nice like set of armor. It kind of looks like it would be like a cloth, but it also looks like plate in different places, which I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I like it. But yeah, the final fight, you go against the actual boss, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty quick. I'd say that the longest fight was the one against her mount, just because it wasn't actually a DPS push. Definitely, it seems like the DPS has our DPS was able to blow everything away. So we didn't really face too much difficulty. I say that, but the tank almost died because I, was asleep at the wheel. Don't worry about it. But it was really interesting. It was a fun dungeon overall. It was just super like bursty. Like there'd be a bunch of time where I'd just be walking around, and then all of a sudden someone would be almost dead. So it was kind of balancing those two situations. But I had a lot of fun. I'm looking for part 2, looking forward to part 2 a lot. I'm really excited to see what it brings, and I'm excited to see what other content I can expect at level 50, and try out some more stuff. But yeah, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, if you did make it to the end, congratulations. This was quite the long one. Share your thoughts on it, toss it a like, and I'll see you in the next video.